All right, so access to textbook, which Charlotte, Olivia, we'll do that, and then we'll just work together here through this, and then I'm going to move to the notes. I do have an assignment for you today. Won't take you long, I promise, but it's just more or less to really talk about how federalism works. So this chapter is about federalism, and with federalism, it's just talking about the relationship between the state and national government, even local governments, and how these powers are shared. Okay. So as you click here on this page, you'll see the objectives, the purpose, textbook chapters, which I like you guys to click on this first one here. Okay. So click on that first link. It says the federal system. And here's the presentations, which we'll get to today, obviously. But as you can see, it'll bring this one up here, this first page, and then we'll look at section 1 here, and we're going to read the cover story together.
I can't click.
Uh-oh. Here, let me see it. We'll read the cover story together, and then after that, I'll let you guys write some notes down as you read through the section about delegated powers. Okay? I'm going to refresh it, all right? You guys see which one it is. Okay. Okay, I think I moved it for you, but
Alright.
just check. I don't know if that's the one you wanted.
Yeah.
If it doesn't work or something, just hit refresh and it should save your work, okay? All right, you guys ready? Cover story. Anyone want to read this here? Charlotte, how about you? Huh? How about you? Want to read that cover story for us? Okay, thanks. Bro, it's not working? Yeah, just a cover story. Just that little box. All right, Olivia, thank you. Thank you. Good job. All right, so I'm sure you guys do you guys ever see the movie Forrest Gump? No? Are you for real? Oh my gosh. Well, there's a clip in Forrest Gump where he kind of gets involved. How about I'll show it to you then, right? I'll show it to you. Right, but there's a clip of it where he kind of gets involved in this situation, which this was big news, right? The big news about it is that with federalism, this is again balancing the powers between the state and the national government. So what powers does the state have? What does the national government have? And what are shared amongst them both? All right, so in this case, in the 1960s, you can imagine this is the height of the civil rights movement in the US. And well, really ever since the end of the Civil War, which dating back 100 years, they created a set of laws to make the South, right, the southern states segregated, meaning separate. Right? Say separate but equal, but in other words, separate institutions. And this falls here with education. Right, so Governor Wallace is a governor of Alabama. And what he did was stand in front of the doors of Alabama and he tried to prohibit African Americans from coming to school there. Right, so this go along the lines of segregation. Anyway, JFK, I'm sure you know JFK, heard of that before, right? His name before. And he was saying to Governor Wallace, says, listen, right, we need to desegregate the schools, education, and you need to remove yourself here. Okay, we're going to send the National Guard down. If you don't, it's going to get pretty ugly. So this is a dispute between the state and the national government. We're going to learn here with federalism, when it comes to education, this is actually a power given to the states, okay? So in other words, Governor Wallace is saying, Alabama, right, when it comes to education, right, we're going to stay segregated. That's what we're going to do, right? This is a power given to the state. So ultimately, he has the power to do it. But when it comes to the idea of offering different opportunities for different people in the United States, right? That's where the federal government comes in, right? They have these powers, right? Even though it's not, the education's not for the national government. This is an implied power by the national government that they, right, can't allow this segregation to occur. In other words, they were going to desegregate the schools and offer an equal opportunity to all Americans, not just the select few. So let's face it, right? The schools in the South here, especially during the time of the Jim Crow laws, African American schools, do you think they're as well kept as, let's say, schools for white Americans? No, they weren't. You think they offered the same education and materials or learning opportunities? No, they didn't, right? The funding was totally different. So in other words, this wasn't fair, not fair at all. And that's where the national government steps in. And that's where JFK was saying, hey, remove yourself, or this is not gonna go over well. Anyway, this was one dispute here. Again, that was really national, broadcast nationally. And we're seeing exactly how the state national government, when coming in conflict, this could cause some really, really ugly stuff here. Like I mentioned, Forrest Gump, they put it in the movie, and obviously it was one of these interesting parts. It was kind of funny, which you'll find, but it just really goes to show how very difficult, and when it comes to the government too, and how difficult they can act with one another. Another good example of where the state and national government might butt heads is probably remember COVID-19, right? Some states are saying, hey, some of these policies that the national government's putting out, some states are like, we're not going to follow it, right? A lot of these states have different policies for certain situations. Again, economic policies, right, are different, right? Each state has different dynamics, right? Different problems and issues. Right? You think about some of these southern states in the United States, they face a lot of immigration, right? Texas, especially illegal immigration. And their policies are going to be different compared to, let's say, Pennsylvania when it comes to other, certain ideas of immigration. Anyway, what I'd like you guys to do is just read through the division of powers. So I'm just looking at the topics here, what's in blue. So read through the division of powers, national powers, and then you're going to stop right where you get to the states and the nation. Okay. We'll talk about the states here more tomorrow, but that's all I want you to read. So it's really going to talk about national powers, delegated powers. All right. So I'll give you guys some time, and then I'll put up the terms for you, and we'll move on. All right, when you guys are done, here are your vocab terms for the start of the new chapter. So again, it's called federalism. That's what the chapter name is. We just got done reading out a textbook and we just started our terms now. Okay. All right, okay. So delegated powers, just make sure you know, write down right next to the term that these are federal powers, meaning that they're for the national government. All right. So delegated or given to the national government. All right. So when we talked about the formation of our government with the failure of the Articles of Confederation, the creation of the Constitution, then right through that constitutional convention, right, there were some powers that were specifically written down that the national government would have. And obviously, as our country has grown and faced a lot of different problems or issues, well, they realized that the powers need to maybe expanded. All right, but make sure you guys know delegated powers just means national federal powers. So they're given to the national government. All right, express powers. Write this down. Right, these are known as enumerated powers. So enumerated powers. That just means they're specifically written in the Constitution that these are powers for the national government. And today we'll talk about a few examples. Implied powers. So implied powers are powers that are given to the national government, but they're not specifically written down. Okay, so in other words, they're suggested but not directly stated. So it's not like you'll find them into the Constitution. It's not in there. It's just that these are powers over time that are necessary for the United States government to have. Oh, I missed one. Sorry. I did. There you go. So anyway, in other words, implied powers are, again, powers not specifically stated, but implied that the national government has it. So we'll talk about a few of those examples today too. Elastic clause, known as the necessary and proper. Right? Think of elastic, it's stretchy, right? It means it stretches past where it's really kind of designed to be. And this elastic clause is expressing that the national government's powers are stretched out a little bit more than what the Constitution lays out. Right? A lot of people look at them and say, oh man, I can't believe the national government has these powers too. And there are a lot of fights going up against the Federalists when creating these implied powers. But in all reality, it is important for them to have. So the elastic clause was created, which we'll talk more about that tomorrow, in order to give the national government a little bit more power than what's stated in the Constitution. Okay. And then finally, inherent powers. You guys know what inherent means? No, it's natural. It's naturally given to you, right? So in other words, inherent powers are naturally natural powers of the government. So we'll talk about the examples today, but that would be like controlling immigration, right? That's a good example of inherent powers when it comes to acquiring new land or recognizing foreign countries. So inherent powers are just something that's given to every sovereign state, meaning every country around the world. They have the opportunity to control their, borders, control their immigration. When it comes to when it comes to um, you know, acquiring new land, every country has the ability to do that. So again, it's just given to every country. All right, good. All right, so we'll talk about some examples here of these other forms today. All right, so here's the presentation. You guys can find that in modules. There you go. So federalism. All right, so what is it? So federalism divides the powers of the United States government between the national government and the states. So again, we have 50 states, and it's unique again because every state has its own set of issues, concerns, problems. Obviously their dynamics might be a lot different. Their population, right? Their location geographically obviously makes another reason why their policies might be a little bit different. So, in other words, the states, because there's 50 of them, because they're all over scattered across the country, and because they face a lot of different issues and concerns and problems, well, their policies might look a little bit different. Anyway, when it comes to the powers, disputes amongst the states and the national government, all right, their constitution has to align. So each state's constitution has to align with the national government, right? Yeah, it might look different state to state, but for the most part, they got to align with the national government's constitution. But the biggest thing to note is that federalism just divides the powers between the national government and the states. And we'll talk about reserve powers here soon. We'll talk about concurrent powers too. But today we're just going to focus on delegated powers. All right, so there's a U.S. Capitol building, and then there's our state building. Harrisburg, yeah. You guys visit there at all? Field trip, right? I think you guys said you had fifth grade or something. No? No? Oh. You went to Philly? Oh, that's right. You said you went to Philly. Do you guys go to Harrisburg at all? You didn't visit the state Capitol building. Maybe we can do that. Ms. O'Neill's always begging to go on a field trip. Maybe, Katie. Maybe. I'm not promising anything. Definitely fit everybody here in a van. So that'd be good. That'd be good. All right, delegated powers. Again, like I mentioned, this is the Constitution provides for national powers. So the national government's powers means they're delegated or given to the national government. Okay. All right. Anyway, we'll talk about the three branches of that, which we discussed already, the vocab, and I'll just give you some unique examples here on the next couple slides, detailing about express or enumerated, implied powers, and inherent powers. So I'd like you guys to write down some examples as I go through it, just to give you a better understanding. And when we do get to the test, right, you can clearly tell the difference between expressed, implied, and inherent powers. All right, so again, delegated just means it's given to the national government. You see that on a test, just know that delegated, national government. All right, so here we go. So here are the three subcategories of it, the three types of delegated powers. So it's, again, expressed, implied, and inherent, which we already talked about. You good there? Can I move on? All right. All right, first thing, express powers or enumerated powers, meaning that they're specifically written down in the Constitution. Well, they spell it out literally, right? The founding fathers of what the national government set up designed to do. And as you can see, it's almost like word for word what we saw with some of the issues of the Articles of Confederation, right? Right? A lot of the weaknesses, a lot of the problems of it, well, they wanted to make sure that they wrote down, right, and expressed in the Constitution how they can solve and, come up with a better idea that what the national government can do. All right, so lay and collect taxes, that's one of the biggest ones. Remember, the articles didn't have that. Coin money. Remember, all the states had their own form of currency. So yeah, now the national government has the ability to create, obviously currency. A lot of times when you pump out too much money down in the economy, that causes inflation. It does, right? But in other words, one of the biggest problems was well, that currency was all over the place with each state having their own. So the national government should have its own and coin it. All right, regulate foreign and interstate commerce. That's very important. And we'll talk about some court cases here, even over trash, believe it or not, right? When it comes to commerce, when it comes to trade amongst the states. Remember, we talked about it in chapter 2 about with the Articles of Confederation and how the states were pretty much tariffing goods, right, from other states, other products from other states, and that caused like almost trade wars between them and how they're acting like their own nations. Well, I think it's important here that the national government controls that to make sure that these states don't have these forms of economic warfare against one another. All right, raise and maintain armed forces. Obviously, that's very important. Declare war. Yep. Grant patents and copyrights and fix standards for weights and measures. All right. So again, these are all expressed, written down, enumerated in the Constitution that you can specifically see written down. And those are good examples, right? Those are really, really good examples. So in other words, it's like a rule book in a way of what the national government can actually do. All right, implied powers. So implied powers, again, aren't written down in the Constitution. They're not specifically stated, but I'm sure you guys have heard that before. Well, it's implied that, I have this power, I have this ability, right? It's implied that he or she should have done something. Even though you're not specifically stating it or saying it, well, it's something that's kind of obvious. Does that make sense? All right, that's what implied powers are. So they're obvious in a way that the national government would have this set of power. So we'll talk about the necessary proper clause more tomorrow, known as the elastic clause, because it stretches the government's power when needed, right? So that's a good way to think about it. Elastic, it stretches. Yeah. Anyway, regulation of labor, those are example. That's an example here of an implied power. Okay, when you think about unemployment, when it comes to how we're going to try to solve those issues, when it comes to minimum wage, right? This all plays a factor in implied powers by the national government, right? Building highways and dams. So yeah, roads, commerce is important. The national government is in control of that, but what about the interconnection of it, right? Did the founding fathers ever think they'd have, Interstate 81 or cars or, different types of trucks like we have today? No, they didn't think that we'd have that or even think of it. So it's important that the national government has these set of powers that expand past when the Constitution was written. All right, determination of federal crimes, right? Prohibition against racial discrimination. So again, we just talked about that here at the start of the class with that cover story. That's a good example. All right, another one too, building of the national bank. I think that'd be important, right? So when it comes to managing the country's money, right? Obviously, that's important, and then the national government should have that set of power. Creating the IRS, oh, geez, here we are trying to dismantle that a bit now. But the IRS is a good example too of an agency created by the national government where we need to collect our taxes somehow, right? And the founders really didn't explain how, but it's a good example of an implied power. Regulating the internet, that's another good example too, right? So when it comes to certain things that you see that you visualize on websites or television, again, the founding fathers didn't think that would be something that they come across. But again, that necessary and proper clause, that elastic clause, makes sure the national government has that stretch power. All right, so that's a good example. All right, inherent powers. So inherent powers just means that this is something that all governments, all sovereign nations, all states, right, they have. So, in other words, this is again just given to a country, right? They have these powers, they have the ability to utilize these powers when need be. So, regulate immigration, that's a great example. And we're seeing it today, obviously, with a lot of the policies by President Trump, right? When it comes to the border, right? Southern and northern border, right? When it comes to a lot of the illegal immigration that was happening, a lot of the crimes maybe that was occurring, some of the people that were letting in when it comes to maybe their values doesn't mesh with the United States, or when it comes to certain drugs, right? Different types of harmful chemicals coming across. Well, that needs to get regulated sometimes. Again, other presidents will have it open, right? They might open it up a little bit more depending on the situation. And another good example during COVID-19, right? We tried to limit immigration because, well, we want to try to stop the spread of that virus. So, yeah, again, this is just given to a country. It's not like it's just designed for one or not the other. Every country has the ability to do that. Right. A lot of other countries, especially in Europe, are a little bit more open to some immigration, right? And a lot of people are vocalizing against that right now because maybe causing some harm to their social fabric. Um, anyway, acquire territory. All right. So when you think about expanding one's borders, either through warfare or maybe economic means or just trade, who knows, right? So acquiring territories again, just given to a sovereign nation. So when you think about the war with Russia and Ukraine, it's terrible, it's awful. There's a lot of death there. We're obviously hoping that comes to an end, but when it comes to a dispute amongst two countries and about certain land, well, they, I guess, technically have the right to, obviously expand that. I know today with the United Nations, a little different, right? So this organization to try to protect nations and their borders, this coalition of nations to do so, right? So I guess there is an international body out there to try to protect it, but more or less, when it comes down to it, these nations have the ability to expand if need be. Greenland, what's going to happen? Who knows? Who knows? Canada, the 51st state. I mean, that's kind of getting to be a sour joke now at this point, but what the heck's going on there? Who knows? All right. And then grant diplomatic recognition, protect the nation. Again, these are inherent. This is something the government just has. All right. Any questions here? We good there? All right. Real quick, I'll cover this too. When it comes to denied to the national government, obviously this is going to be set to the state senate. So when it comes down to it, expressly denies powers via the Bill of Rights, right? Denies powers to regulate education. Again, that's a state power. We kind of talked about that with the cover story today, right? Marriage, divorce, and local government when it comes to your IDs, right? Obviously, that's important. That's a state by state issue. And denies powers to tax state governments. So those are powers that are denied to the national government. And again, when you think about reserve powers, state powers, which we'll talk about next, right? That's ultimately where they go to. All right, is there any questions? You guys good with that? All right, real quick, here's your assignment, which we are coming to the end of the marking period here. So guys, please look at your grades, look at the assignments that maybe you might be missing. Anyway, here's your assignment. All we're going to do is read through this section. Okay. And here are the questions. So the questions are pretty straightforward. Now there's one where it's going to be difficult to try to answer. I get that. I know it, but try to answer it the best of your ability. Okay. You'll find out which one. But this is the language here, the conversation between JFK and Governor Wallace back in the 1960s over this dispute with education. So anyway, just like you to read through that, answer the questions. When you're done, just submit it on Canvas. All right.